Today we are here in Tinkercad and we will be modeling a small functioning catapult. I have a new fresh file here to begin with, so let's begin. I will first change the name of the file so that we could keep everything organized and be able to identify. I'm going to change it to first and last name and the item. The first geometry that I will be using is a box that I will place here in the center of my work plane. This will be sized to match 40 millimeters by 30 millimeters with a height of 1 millimeter. That is our base. This will be followed by adding a triangular prism that will have the dimensions of 40 millimeters to match, this depth here of 2 millimeters, and a height of 20 millimeters. I will now select both of these items. I will hit L for my alignment. You can also go to this alignment tool. I will click on the red shape. As you can see, if I hover over it, I get new alignment tools. So I will click on the red shape to make it the master geometry. And I will now go ahead and align this center from left to right, and we'll align it front from front to back. And that is that. The next step is to make a copy of this for the opposing side. So I will hit Alt and Shift as I drag this over to the side. I could make sure that it is aligned here. If it was not aligned, I can select both of these, click L for alignment, select the base as the master geometry, and align it to the back as so. The next item I will have here is a cylinder, and this cylinder should match the size of, should have a diameter of 3 millimeters, so I could hold Shift so I could proportionally size this. As soon as I start dragging or changing the size, I can now click here and automatically and proportionally change this to have a diameter of 3 millimeters, and it will have a height of 45 millimeters, like so. For the next step, I will first need to group the original shapes here. So select all of these. I can also select one of them at a time by selecting one, holding Shift, selecting the other one, and again the last one here. They are all now selected. I will now go to Group or hit Ctrl G to group them. This cylinder here will now need to be rotated 90 degrees, like so. I will now select both of these items, click L on my keyboard to align them, make this the master geometry, and I will now align them centered from left to right and centered from front to back. Deselect everything, and selecting only the cylinder, I will bring it down to have a distance of 15 millimeters from the ground, like so. Now I will take this cylinder, make a copy of it or duplicate it right here. After I duplicate it, I will now go over here to hide the item or hit Ctrl H to hide the item. I now have one of these hidden and the other one showing. The one that is showing, I will go ahead and select it, and holding Alt and Option, I will increase the size to 3.5 millimeters, so 3.5 millimeters. Now I will turn this into an empty shape or a hole by clicking here, and just for alignment purposes, I'm going to select this, and holding Shift, I'm going to move it inward like such. I will now come over here to show all of my hidden items. And if I see this from the front in flat view, I should notice that these two are concentric circles, meaning that the cylinder the original cylinder is centered within the previous cutting cylinder that I have here. I will now select this empty cylinder, hold shift and select my base. Will be the base to the catapult, and group them in order for me to make a cut. If I hide this cylinder, I can see that I have these holes there, and I will bring it back, and we can now move on to the next item right here. Alright, so the next step is to bring in the lever mechanism, or create the lever mechanism, and we would be doing that with a box that will have the dimensions of 60 millimeters by 3 millimeters by 1 millimeter, like so. This will now be centered along with our axle right here. So I will select this rectangular prism, hold shift and select the cylindrical prism, or the cylinder, and I will go ahead and hit L for alignment, click on the cylinder in order to make it the master geometry, where I will then center it, centered from top to bottom. I will also align it left from left to right, and lastly I will center it from front to back, like so. Next step, we will be using a sphere, which I will bring in right here, and I will size this down to have a diameter of 12 millimeters. So I will hold shift so I can proportionally size it down to 12 millimeters. Following that, I will go ahead and hold shift and alt as I make a copy of this, and holding shift I will proportionally size this down to 10.5 millimeters and turn this into a empty shape. Selecting both of these spheres, I will go ahead and click L for alignment. I don't really need a master geometry at this point, but I could make it this one, where I will next center this centered from front to back and centered from left to right, as well as centered from top to bottom. If I make this transparent, I can see the other item is within it. Next, I will bring in a box. In this box, I will change the size to be 6 millimeters, and I will place it here where I can use it to cut the previous items. If I select everything, I can hit group up here or Control G to group them, and I should have a hollow semi-sphere, this half of the sphere. To flip it over, I can either rotate this 180 degrees, or I can click M on my keyboard and mirror it vertically to have the following effect. Selecting both of these items, the lever and the semi-sphere, I will hit L on my keyboard for alignment, select the lever as the master geometry, and I will now go ahead and align this to the bottom, and I will also align it centered from front to back, like so. This last part right here, I'm going to hold shift as I move it, and I can just go ahead and move it, or eyeball something that looks like this. I'm not using the alignment because I don't want it to be aligned with the extremes here, but this should be good. Ensure that it is still centered from front to back and bottom aligned, and we are done with that. I will now go ahead and take this shape, hold Alt on my keyboard and pull it up to make a copy. where I will next ungroup this and delete this geometry and delete this geometry. And while holding Shift on my keyboard, or Alt and Shift on my keyboard, I will size this down to be 10 millimeters. So this is 10 by 10 by 10. I will now make this into a solid, and I can bring it down to sit on this lever. If I want to make sure that it's exactly on the lever, I could find out what is the limit of the top limit of the surface here by checking its elevation, which is 16 plus 1. So this should be 17 millimeters from the ground. And there we go. If we go back to perspective, everything seems to look a little bit nicer. Alright, so I'm going to change some of these colors just because I really like to choose my own colors. I will now select the entire launching system here, or the lever, select the cylinder, the rectangular prism, and the semi-sphere, and I will group them and also change the color as I really like to do so. And here we go. Now we have this mostly complete catapult. For this, so I can use it as an aiming mechanism, where I will bring in a cylinder, shrink this down to 1 millimeter, and change the diameter to be 50 millimeters. And 1 millimeter. So this is 50 by 50 by 1. Since this is 1 millimeter tall, I will now need to raise the entire assembly on this side by 1 millimeter. So make sure that it is 1 millimeter from the ground. I can see that there is a small gap right here. And I will select this cylinder and the base, click L for alignment, make this the master, and I can now center it in both of these axes. Getting close to making this be functional, I will now go ahead and change this as well, because I like changing the colors. But here we go, and let's continue. So the next step for this to function properly is to add an axle connector, and I will do that by coming over here to this drop down menu and scrolling down to SimLab, where I have access to these items, and the first one that I need is this axle connector. I'll zoom in here so I could place it on this surface. I grab the axle connector and I place it on this surface. Make sure it's not on any of these other surfaces, but rather this one right here. This has two nodes. The first node is going to be dropped on top of the base, and the second node will be dropped on top of the lever. And there we go. I will now deselect and reselect the axle connector so I can edit its specifications here or details, and I will turn this into a motor from motor type onto servo, where I want to set the following settings. The settings here are going to be on the torque. The motor torque will be 40 Newton meters, and we will set the upper limit to 60 degrees. Let's see what that is doing. Sorry about that. Here we go back to the axle connector, and when I set the limit, I can see anyway, so here it is. So 40 Newton meters with a upper degree limit of 60. Okay, so here is, that's what I wanted to show. If I do like 12 Let's see where that limit is, and 60 is where I want it to be. 60 degrees up so that it can launch the item. And there we go. Now I'm going to, again, with the axle connector selected, I'm going to click on Edit Interactions, and I will add 2 interactions. First one being S to shoot, where I will change the settings to set position 2. I will go ahead and bring this up to 180 degrees on press, and then I will click on the D key right here, set position to 0 degrees on press. Alright, so let's go ahead and continue here. I will now go into our sim lab, click on the sim lab, and see where we're at. We always want to test our designs as we're building them before we go too far ahead. So I'll hit play, and we're gonna hit our functions, so the S key, and the whole thing just kind of jumped. So let's reset it. I'm going to this time instead click right here to make the base static. So select the base, make it static, and hit play again. If I hit S, I can see that it has now changed. So I will reset it, and I will go to our 3D working space, and I want to be able to shoot this a certain distance, but I am running out of space here, so I'm going to change the settings. Let's try 1000 by 1000. Close settings. I will now select everything and move it to the edge, where I can go back to my simulation, hit space to start, and there we go. We got a shooting catapult. Oh, and the other option was to hit S to shoot it, and D should bring it back. So we have this function right here that S shoots it, and D brings it back, resets. So we can reset